guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Casey Way. In today's episode, I'm going to tell you about the most embarrassing moment I had on stage. So if you've been following my podcast or you know a little bit about me, I worked on cruise ships for many years. My first 2 years, I worked on board Carnival as one of the fun squad and the entertainers. But my first contract on the Carnival ship, the Carnival Glory, went for 9 months. So it was a very long contract. Usually we only do about 6 months. Halfway through that contract, I got promoted into running the comedy club, being the comedy club manager, which was absolutely incredible. I had so much fun doing this. So in every Carnival ship, there's something called the Punchliner Comedy Club, and we have all sorts of different comedians that come on. Our ship did a 7-day itinerary, and in that 7-day itinerary, we had 4 different comedians come on board. So all the guests would get 2 comedians at the start of the cruise, and they would do 2 shows each a night, 1 kids show and 1 adult show. And then halfway through the cruise, so they would have 3 nights, and then halfway through the cruise, we'd have a comedy break night where it was the changeover day. So those comedians would leave, and we'd have 2 new comedians fly on, and they would join the ship, and then they would each do 2 shows a night, an adults one and a kids one, for 3 nights, the last 3 nights of the cruise. Then all the guests used to get off. Those 2 comedians would stay on for then the first half of the second cruise. So each 2 comedians used to stay with us. This was particular to our ship and ships that had a similar itinerary, but these 2 comedians would stay with us for a week, do the back half of one cruise and the front half of another, and then they would either fly to a different ship or fly home. So I had the privilege of being the comedy club manager. That meant I got to meet with all the comedians, chat with all of them, run the lounge, make it literally like a comedy lounge. And each day, each show, I would meet the comedians. They would give me a little bit of an intro of theirs, and I would go up on stage. My job was to go up on stage, get the crowd excited. I would have a minute or 2 to do like a little bit of a, hey, this is who I am. I used to go, hey guys, my name is Casey. I come to you all the way from Australia. So I want to hear everybody give me a nice, loud, g'day, mate. And by the end of the cruise, I would be able to have everybody say, I come to you all the way from, and everyone would yell out, Australia. And then I go, okay, cool. You know what I want to hear. Let's hear a nice loud, g'day, mate. And everybody together would go, g'day, mate. It was amazing. It was so much fun. I actually have a video on it that I will reshare to my socials when this podcast goes live. So that's what I had to do. And then I would read the rules. I would just say, listen, this is either like a family show and the kids are loud, but, parents look after your kids, don't have them heckling. Or if it was an adult show, I'd be like, all right, keep the chatter to a minimum. We're all here to see a show. And also there could be some, swear words. So if you're not comfortable with that, you got to get out now. So I would do a little bit of like the rules and make it a bit of fun. And then I would go, okay, it's time to start the show. And I would go into the comedians' intros. And then introduce them and say, welcome, like everybody help me welcome. And I would introduce the comedian. Now, how the whole comedy club worked and how promotions worked is if you got noticed, if you got high ratings, everything worked on a rating system. So the guest would rate the comedy club overall, and they would rate the comedy club host. So that would be myself. And then they would rate the comedians in their like survey that they got when they went home. The actual comedians then would rate me as a comedy club host, like how good was Casey? Did she have the energy? Was she vibrant? Did she do my, intro right? So on and so forth. So they would rate me, and the higher ratings that the club got and the higher ratings that I got, the more that like head office would notice and the more you'd be pushed for, promotions and bonuses and things like that. And then I would also rate the comedians. So at the end of each cruise, I would have the 4 comedians and I'd be like, this person was really good. This person, needed to work on a little bit of this. This person's stuff wasn't very appropriate, but usually it was all fine. Usually it was all great. It was all smiles. Everybody was having a great time. But I would also rate them as well. Now, this one cruise, I was having this comedian come on. It was the first time that I was working with him. And he was very well known in the, the industry and amongst all the comedy clubs. He'd been around for years and years and years and years. And he was well known for being quite intimidating. But he's also one of the comedians that if he gave you a high rating, like head office would take notice of you straight away. So the pressure was kind of on. And usually I'm like in communications with the comedians before they get on board. I usually go and greet them when, they got on board just to welcome them on, make sure that they're comfortable. I give them a call, and I usually get their intro, a couple of hours before we go on stage. I didn't really get to see this guy. He'd done it all before. He was fine. He'd been on the ship before. He knew his way around. Like, he had no interest in kind of meeting with the comedy club host beforehand. So he's come to the show 10 minutes before. He's a lovely man, let me say. Overall, he's just a very big, burly man that was quite quiet but intimidating at the same time. And so he rocked up like 10 minutes before the show, and I introduced myself, and he was kind of like, all right, yeah, let's do this. And he told me his intro, and I was like, okay, cool. Gonna go do it. Anyway, I was like, it's time to get the show started. Let's go down. So both of us walked down to the front of the stage. Now, we weren't backstage, like we were just to the side of the stage, so everybody could see us standing there. And then the technician like flashes the lights and plays the intro music, and I run on stage and I go, hi everybody, and I get them to do the whole like Australia and g'day mate thing, and I tell them the rules, and we get them all riled up. And then I go into his intro, and I'm like, oh, you may have seen him on this. He does Laughing for the Troops. He does, this, that, and the other, because they're very well known in the US themselves. They're US comedians, so they've been on different shows, or they've been in famous comedy clubs. So you give the whole spiel, and then I go, and please help me welcome to the stage. And I completely forgot his name. I blanked out, and everything went quiet. And for a second, I was like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. What do I do? And I just went, your next comedian, and started clapping. And everyone kind of did like a half like, oh gosh, this is awkward. And anyway, I've looked to turn to him. And so has the entire crowd looked to turn to him. And he's just like crossed his arms. He's just like, nope, I ain't coming up until you say my name. And I was like, come on to the stage. And he was just like shaking his head. And then thank goodness a guy in the front was like, yelled up to me. He goes, it's Thomas Brown. And I was like, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the stage, Thomas Brown. And anyway, then he like kind of shakes his head and walks onto the stage, and like just kind of shakes his head as I walk off. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I just done? And I kind of laughed it off, and I'm like, ha ha ha, silly, we never get to sleep here on board. Like we're working 24/7, because that's something we get asked a lot. And anyway, he went up on stage and he made a bit of a joke about it, and everything was fine. But I'm sitting in the back going, oh my God, Casey, you silly person. Oh my gosh. Anyway, afterwards, I was like, I apologized. I was like, oh, Thomas, I'm so sorry. I really do apologize. I just had a complete mind blank. And he was very nice about it. He was like, oh, no, look, it's fine. Just kind of don't let it happen again. So I was like, no, I swear it won't. I swear it won't. Anyway, later I had the other comedian coming on. He had a show a little bit later. So now suddenly I'm spooked. Now I'm like, okay, no, you'll be fine. You've got this. You've done this. Like, you'll be sweet. And anyway, gone through the whole thing, taken them down, gotten him upstage, nailed his intro. So I remembered all the things, the TV shows and appearances and everything that he'd been on. And then I introduced him, but I said his name, but I gave him the wrong last name. So I got his first name right, but I just completely stuffed up his last name. Luckily, he was a bit of a better sport, and he kind of came up. I didn't even realize I'd done it wrong. And anyway, I came up on stage, like I shake hands with them, and then I walk off, and he walks up to the microphone, and then he just corrected me, and I can't even remember off the life of me which comedian it was. I worked with a lot, but he corrected me, and everyone just like burst out laughing, and they were like, "Oh, Casey's done it again!" Like, I was like, "Oh, this is just the worst night that I'm possibly having on stage." And I was so embarrassed, and everyone was nice about it, but like even the guests all knew that I was kind of like, I stuffed up, so they would like poke and prod and like kind of make jokes as I was walking out, and I kind of just brushed it off, and I was like, oh yeah, it's lack of sleep, and I get too excited and speak too fast, and I kind of like brushed it off. But then I was spooked. So every single time then I had to go up to stage, like I would remember the script fine, but I had the microphone in my hand, and I would write the comedian's name on my thumb. so that it never happened. And I swear to you, just because I spooked myself, I had to do this for every comedian for the next like couple of weeks. I always just made sure before I ran on stage, I wrote their name on my thumb so that if I did like mess up, no one else could see it, but I could quickly just look down at my thumb and see like their name on there. So yeah, it didn't happen again, but that was by far one of the most embarrassing. And let me tell you, these comedy clubs are not small. The comedy clubs, I think ours seated like 350 people. And then that's not including standing room. Like we had queues outside to get into the like our comedy club. And it was one of the biggest ones. So it's not like it was just 10 or 20 people. It was like 400 or 500 people that this that I've stuffed up in. And lights are on you and you're on stage, and it was just very, very, very scary and very, very terrifying. And suffice to say, the whole ship heard about it, and I was a bit of the joke, the brunt of the joke for a couple of weeks. But I took it well. I took it like a champ, and I got over it and went back on stage and absolutely loved the rest of my time there. So yeah, that's one of the most embarrassing stories that I think has ever happened to me on the cruise ship. I actually know there's actually a few more, which I won't dive into now. You'll have to stick around and listen for those. I've got tons more cruise ship stories. But I absolutely loved being in the comedy club, and actually I'm very excited to announce that in the coming weeks, I'm starting an interview series. So one of these episodes a week. So if you haven't noticed yet, I do release 3 episodes each week. I release one Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. So the Fridays one occasionally are going to start being interviews. I've already got some amazing people lined up for these interviews. One of them being one of the comedians that I used to work with frequently on board. He used to be a cruise director. He was a cruise director for Carnival for many years, and then turned the comedian, and he's just very, very funny. So watch out for that. I do have that. I've met some amazing people over the past couple of weeks that I'm going to be interviewing, along with some friends that I've shared some pretty crazy adventures with around the world. So they're going to be joining me on to talk about that. So guys, please make sure you stay tuned. If you are listening, whatever you're listening on, if you haven't yet done so, please hit subscribe. And if you can, take a moment to just give me a review. That really, really helps me out so much, and I really would appreciate it. And also, if you didn't know, you can watch these on YouTube. So I do film them and actually post them to YouTube at the same time. So if you do feel like seeing my face and seeing my expressions and my silly hand movements as I talk and as we go, then you can also check it out on there. But that's all I have for you today, guys. Please stick around for the next episodes, and please feel free to reach out and let me know what you think. I always love hearing back from you and hearing some feedback. And if there's any questions you have or episode ideas, again, please reach out to me and let me know, and I'd be happy to answer your questions in the next couple of episodes. So guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, and I can't wait to see you on the next episode of The Casey Way.